Richard Hawthorne looked a terrified 7-year-old boy in the eyes and told him the cruelest lie a grown man can tell a child. He said, "Your mother left you because she looked at your face and felt nothing. She never wanted you. Now stop crying and become someone worth keeping." That single sentence built an empire of fear and buried a mother's love for 25 years. But tonight, a poor maid holding a forgotten diary is about to walk into a mafia boss's restaurant and speak the one name nobody has dared whisper in a quarter of a century. Before we begin, if stories about hidden truth, betrayal, and a love that refuses to die move something in your heart, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because this story unfolds like a slow fire, and the final part will stay with you. And do me a small kindness. Comment the name of the city where you are watching from right now so I can see just how far this story has traveled tonight. Emily Carter had cleaned other people's floors since she was 19 years old, and she had learned one thing that rich people never seem to understand. The people who owned the most were often the loneliest, and the people who owned nothing were often the only ones willing to sit beside a dying stranger. That was why she was the last person on earth to hold Margaret Collins' hand. The nursing home on the north edge of Chicago was the kind of place families sent their elderly and then forgot the address. Emily worked the night shift there 4 evenings a week, and she cleaned homes during the day, and on the days in between, she took care of her younger brother Daniel, who had shattered his leg in 3 places at the factory and could no longer work at all. She was 26 years old, and she had not slept a full night in 2 years. Margaret was in room 14, and for the first 3 months, Emily knew her only as the woman who never had visitors. Not one. Not on holidays, not on her birthday, not ever. "You don't have to sit with me," Margaret told her the first night, her voice thin as paper. "The others just clean and leave. That's your job. Sitting isn't your job." "Sitting isn't a job," Emily said, wiping down the small table by the bed. "It's just being kind, and that's free." Something changed in the old woman's face that night. A crack in a wall that had been standing for decades. Over the weeks that followed, Emily fixed the broken radio Margaret loved, the one that only played the old jazz stations. She brought her real food from the diner instead of the gray meals the home served. She stayed past the end of her shift, sometimes an hour, sometimes 3, just talking, just listening, just holding the hand of a woman the whole world had decided to abandon. And Margaret slowly began to speak of a son. "I had a boy once," Margaret said one night, staring at the ceiling. "A beautiful boy. He had my eyes. Everyone said so." "What happened to him?" Emily asked gently. Margaret was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice broke into pieces. "He was taken from me," she whispered, "and they made him believe I was the one who left." Emily did not push. She had learned that grief moves at its own speed and cannot be hurried. But she noticed that after that night, Margaret began sleeping with an old leather diary clutched against her chest, the way a frightened child holds a stuffed animal against the dark. Then came the last night. Emily knew it was the last night the moment she walked in. There is a stillness that settles over a person when the body has decided it is finished, and Emily had seen it too many times to mistake it for anything else. Margaret's breathing had gone shallow and slow, like a tide pulling out for the final time. "Emily," Margaret said, and her hand searched blindly across the blanket until Emily caught it. "Emily, are you there?" "I'm here. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "You're a good girl. You know that? In all my long life, you were the only person who looked at me like I mattered." "You do matter, Margaret. You matter to me." The old woman's fingers tightened with a strength that should not have been possible in a body so frail. "I need you to do something for me," she said. "Something no one else can do. Will you promise me? Before I ask, promise me you'll try." Emily's throat closed. "I promise. Whatever it is, I promise I'll try." Margaret's eyes, cloudy and failing, somehow found Emily's face in the dark. "There is a man in the city," she said. "A powerful man. His name is Vincent Blackwell. Everyone knows his name, but nobody knows the truth about him. Not even him." "Vincent Blackwell," Emily repeated. The name meant nothing to her. She cleaned houses. She did not move in the world of powerful men. "Take my diary to him," Margaret said. "Put it in his hands, not his people, his hands, and tell him." She stopped, gathering the last of herself. "Tell him he must know the truth before it is too late. Tell him." "I will. I'll tell him." "What's the truth, Margaret? What do I say if he asks?" But Margaret's breath had changed again, gone even fainter, and her lips barely moved. "He must know," she breathed. "He must know before he does something that can never be undone. Promise me. Find Vincent. Find my—" And then the sentence simply stopped, unfinished, hanging in the air of that small room, like the last note of a song cut off before its end. Margaret Collins was gone. Emily sat there for a long time, holding the hand that no longer held hers back, and she wept for a stranger the way she wished someone would one day weep for her. The diary was still clutched against Margaret's chest. Emily gently freed it, and as she lifted it, she felt how heavy it was. Not with paper, with something else, with years. She took it home, and she did not open it, because it did not belong to her. A promise was a promise, and Margaret had said to put it in one man's hands. It took Emily 3 days to find out who Vincent Blackwell was. She asked the woman at the corner store, and the woman's face went strange and careful. "Why do you want to know about him?" the woman asked, lowering her voice even though the store was empty. "I have to deliver something to him." "Deliver it and leave," the woman said. "Don't stay, don't ask questions, and don't look him in the eye longer than you have to." "Why? Who is he?" The woman leaned across the counter. "He owns half the restaurants in this city on paper," she said. "But the restaurants aren't where his money comes from. You understand me, honey? People who cross that man don't get to complain about it afterward, because there is no afterward." Emily felt something cold slide down her spine, but she had made a promise to a dying woman, and Emily Carter had grown up believing that a promise was the only thing a poor person truly owned, the one possession no one could take from her. So on a cold evening, wearing the only coat she had that was not stained from work, Emily walked into the most expensive restaurant she had ever seen in her life. The place was called Aurelia. The lights were low and golden. The people at the tables wore watches worth more than Emily made in a year. A man in a suit that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body stepped in front of her before she had taken 5 steps inside. "Reservation?" he said, though his eyes had already scanned her cheap coat and her worn shoes and delivered their verdict. "I'm not here to eat," Emily said. "I'm here to see Mr. Blackwell. I have something to give him." The man's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Mr. Blackwell doesn't take walk-ins," he said. "Whatever you're selling, whatever story you've got, we've heard it. Leave the way you came in." "I'm not selling anything." Emily held the diary tighter against her chest. "A woman asked me to bring this to him before she died. It was her last request. I promised her." "Everybody's got a dying woman and a last request," the man said flatly. He raised one hand, and 2 more men in dark suits materialized from the edges of the room the way shadows gather when a light dims. "Miss, I'm going to ask you one time to walk out on your own. You do not want me to ask twice." Emily's heart was hammering so hard she was sure they could hear it. She thought of Daniel at home with his ruined leg. She thought of the rent she could not pay. She thought of every reason in the world to turn around and go home and forget she had ever met a lonely old woman in room 14. And then she thought of Margaret's fingers tightening around her hand. "Promise me." "I made a promise," Emily said, and her voice shook, but it did not stop. "I'm not leaving until this is in his hands." The lead man's patience snapped. He nodded to the 2 others, and they moved toward her, and a hand closed around Emily's arm hard enough to bruise. "Let me go," she said. "Please, you don't understand. This is important." "Sure it is," the man said, already steering her toward the door. "They're all important." They had her halfway across the floor. The other diners had begun to notice now, heads turning, a low murmur running through the golden room. Emily's coat had slipped off one shoulder. Her eyes were burning with tears of shame and helplessness, and she could feel the promise slipping away from her like water through her fingers. And in that moment, with nothing left to lose, Emily did the only thing she could think of. She opened the diary. Her eyes fell on the first page, on the handwriting that filled it, and she read the first thing she saw, calling it out across the room in a voice cracked with desperation. "Adrian," she cried. "The name is Adrian. She wrote it on the first page. My darling Adrian." The effect was instant and total. Every man in a dark suit went rigid. The hand on Emily's arm did not just loosen, it sprang open as if her skin had burned it, because at the far end of the restaurant, in a private booth raised slightly above the rest, a man had been sitting in complete stillness, watching the entire scene without a flicker of interest. Until that name. Vincent Blackwell rose to his feet so slowly that the whole room seemed to hold its breath with him. He was not a large man in the way that Emily had expected. He was something worse. He was still, the way deep water is still, the way the moment before a storm is still. Everything about him said that violence lived very close to the surface and had simply chosen, so far, not to come out. "What did you say?" he said. It was not a question. His voice was quiet, and the quiet was the most frightening thing Emily had ever heard. The lead man in the suit turned toward the booth, suddenly pale. "Boss, she's nobody. Some crazy woman with a story. We're throwing her out, it's handled." "I asked her a question," Vincent said. And he had not raised his voice at all, and every man in the room flinched as if he had shouted, "I did not ask you." His eyes, dark and unreadable, moved to Emily and fixed on her, and she felt them like a physical weight. "Say it again," he said. Emily's mouth had gone dry. Whatever she had walked into, she understood now that it was far deeper than she could see, and that this quiet man in the perfect suit was standing at the edge of something Emily could not begin to understand. "Adrian," she said more softly this time, "it's written here. On the first page of this diary, she wrote, 'My darling Adrian, I have never stopped.'" She looked up. "That's all I read. That's where it stops. I don't know who Adrian is. I don't know who you are, not really. I only know that a woman named Margaret Collins spent the last breath in her body asking me to put this in your hands." The name Margaret Collins hit Vincent Blackwell like a second blow, and Emily watched something impossible happen on the face of the most powerful man in Chicago. His mask cracked. For just an instant, one single instant, the feared mafia boss was not there at all. In his place stood a boy. A lost boy who had heard a name he had spent 25 years trying to forget, and who had just learned that the woman attached to it had been alive somewhere in his city, and was now dead. Then the mask slammed back into place, harder than before. "Everyone out," Vincent said. Nobody moved. The diners looked at one another, uncertain. "Aurelia is closed," Vincent said, and this time his voice carried the full weight of who he truly was. "Everyone, out, now." The room emptied in 90 seconds. Waiters, diners, the men in dark suits, all of them flowing toward the doors, until the golden restaurant that had been full of the wealthy and the powerful held only two people. A mafia boss and a poor maid holding a dead woman's diary. Vincent came down from the raised booth, one slow step at a time. "Sit," he said. Emily sat, because her legs would no longer hold her. Vincent took the seat across from her. Up close, she could see the exhaustion under the control, the years carved into the corners of his eyes. He looked at the diary in her hands the way a man looks at a snake he is not sure is dead. "Where did you get that?" he said. "I told you. From Margaret Collins. She was a patient at the nursing home where I work nights. I took care of her." "You took care of her," Vincent repeated, and there was something in his voice she could not name. "For how long?" "A few months, near the end." "Did she have visitors?" Emily hesitated. She did not want to hurt this man, dangerous as he was, but she would not lie to him either. "No," she said quietly. "Not one. In all the time I knew her, no one came. I think that's why she and I became. I think that's why she talked to me. Because I was there, and no one else was." Vincent's jaw tightened. His hand, resting flat on the table, curled slowly into a fist and then, with visible effort, opened again. "That's not possible," he said. "What isn't?" "Margaret Collins abandoned her child 25 years ago." He said it like a fact he had recited to himself 10,000 times, worn smooth from repetition. "She walked away and she never looked back. That is who Margaret Collins was. That is the only thing Margaret Collins ever did that mattered. So no, I do not believe you sat with her for months out of the goodness of your heart, and I do not believe she died alone and forgotten. Women like that don't die alone. They die comfortable, somewhere far away, having forgotten the people they threw out like garbage. The bitterness in his voice was so old and so deep that Emily felt it in her own chest. I don't know what you were told, she said carefully. But the woman I knew was not a woman who threw anyone away. The woman I knew slept every single night with this diary held against her heart, and the last thing she did before she died, the very last thing, was beg me to find her son and tell him the truth before it was too late. Vincent went very still. Her son, he said. That's what she said. She said, "There is a powerful man in this city. His name is Vincent Blackwell, and he must know the truth. She said you must know before you do something that can never be undone." For a long moment, Vincent did not speak. He was staring at a point somewhere past Emily's shoulder, and she had the sense that he was looking back across 25 years into rooms she could not see. "Do you know who I am?" he said finally. "A woman at the store told me a little," Emily admitted. "She told me to deliver what I had and leave and not ask questions. Smart woman." Vincent's eyes came back to her. "You should have listened to her. Do you understand what kind of world you just walked into? Do you understand that people spend their whole lives trying to get 1 minute of my attention, and they are willing to lie, to cheat, to invent dying mothers, to do anything at all to get it? Do you understand that everyone who comes to me wants something?" "I don't want anything from you," Emily said. "Everyone says that." "I'm not everyone." She was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice now. Something about his contempt had put a spine back into her. "I didn't come here for money. I didn't even want to come. I was afraid. I'm still afraid. My hands won't stop shaking. Look at them. I came because a dying woman spent her last breath asking me to find you. And I know what it is to be poor, Mr. Blackwell, and I know what it is to be desperate, but I also know what it is to keep a promise, because a promise is the only thing I have ever owned that no one could take away from me." The words landed in the silence of the empty restaurant and stayed there. Vincent Blackwell looked at this woman across the table, this maid in a cheap coat with bruises already forming on her arm where his men had grabbed her, and for the first time in more years than he could count, he could not find the angle. He could not find the con. He could not find the thing she wanted, because there wasn't one. "Put it on the table," he said. Emily set the diary down on the white cloth between them. Neither of them touched it. It sat there like a living thing, like the third person at the table, holding 25 years of silence between its leather covers. "You need to understand something," Vincent said, and his voice had changed, gone lower, almost to himself. "The woman who wrote in that book left me when I was 7 years old. I remember the day. I remember standing at a window waiting for her to come back, and she did not come back. And a man told me why. A man who took me in, who raised me, who made me everything I am. He told me she left because she looked at me and felt nothing, because I was not worth staying for." "That's a terrible thing to tell a child," Emily whispered. "It was the truth." "Was it?" The two words hung in the air, and Emily watched them work their way into Vincent like a splinter under the skin. 25 years, Vincent said slowly. "I built my entire life on that truth. Every decision I ever made, everything I became because a boy at a window learned that love is a lie people tell you right before they leave. That lesson made me strong. That lesson kept me alive in a world that eats weak men. I do not know who I am without it." He looked at the diary, "And now you walk into my restaurant, a stranger, a maid, and you tell me the woman who taught me that lesson slept every night holding a book with my name in it, my real name, the name she gave me before he changed it, a name I have not heard spoken aloud since I was a child." "Adrian," Emily said softly. Vincent closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet, and he was furious that they were wet, and that fury was directed at the diary and at Emily and at 25 years, and at a mother he had hated for a quarter of a century and did not know how to stop hating. "If I open this," he said, "and it says what I think it says, then everything I have believed since I was 7 years old is a lie. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what I have done in the name of that lie? The things I have done, the man I became, all of it built on a story that a stranger just walked into my restaurant and set on fire. Then maybe, Emily said gently, the kindest thing would be not to open it at all, and the bravest thing would be to open it anyway. Vincent Blackwell stared at her. "Who are you?" he said. It was almost wondering. "Nobody," Emily said. "I'm nobody. I'm a maid who made a promise to a lonely old woman. That's all I've ever been." "No," Vincent said quietly. "I don't think that's all you are. I think you might be the most dangerous person who has ever walked through that door. Because everyone else who ever came to me came to take something, and you came to give me back the one thing I threw away and told myself I never wanted." His hand moved toward the diary. It stopped an inch away, hovering, trembling almost imperceptibly, the hand of a man who commanded an empire and could not make himself touch a book. 25 years, he said again, to no one. "She waited every day," Emily said. "She told me. She said someone forced her away, someone powerful, someone who wanted you to hate her. She didn't leave you, Mr. Blackwell. That's what she was trying to tell you. That's the truth she died begging me to bring you. She never left. She was taken, and she never, ever stopped looking for her son." Something broke open in Vincent's chest, something that had been sealed shut for a quarter of a century, and for one terrible moment, Emily thought this dangerous man was going to weep in front of her. Instead, his hand closed the final inch and came to rest on the cover of the diary. He did not open it, not yet. He simply held his hand there, feeling the worn leather under his palm, the leather that his mother's hands had held every night of her last months on earth. And he understood, in the way you understand a thing in your body before your mind will accept it, that his whole life was about to divide into everything that came before this moment and everything that would come after. "Leave," he said suddenly. Emily blinked. "What?" "Leave. Go home. You've done what you came to do. The promise is kept." His voice was rough. "I will have someone drive you. I will make sure you are paid for your trouble, whatever that woman's care cost you, whatever you lost coming here." "I don't want your money," Emily said, standing. "I told you, I never did." "I know," Vincent said, and it sounded like it cost him something to admit it. "That's exactly why I want you to have it, because you're the first." Emily paused at the edge of the table. "Are you going to read it?" she asked. Vincent Blackwell looked down at the diary beneath his hand. At the name Adrian written on the first page in a hand he suddenly, achingly remembered. The same hand that had once written his name on the inside cover of his schoolbooks. The same hand he had spent 25 years teaching himself to despise. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've spent my whole life being certain of who I am, and I think if I open this, I will never be certain of anything again." "Maybe that's not the worst thing," Emily said. "Being certain of a lie isn't the same as knowing the truth." She turned to go. "Wait," Vincent said. She stopped. "The man who told me my mother left me because she felt nothing," he said. "The man who raised me. If what you're saying is true, if she was forced away, if someone powerful wanted me to hate her." He stopped, and Emily watched a thought move across his face like the shadow of a cloud crossing a field, a thought so dark that even he seemed frightened of it. "Then someone lied to me. For 25 years. Someone stood between me and my mother and made me hate her on purpose. And that someone is a man I would have died for. A man I have called father since I was 7 years old." The empty restaurant was silent. "What was his name?" Emily asked quietly. "The man who raised you?" Vincent's hand tightened on the diary until his knuckles went white. "Richard," he said, and the word came out like something torn loose. "Richard Hawthorne." He said the name the way you say the name of a man you love. And Emily watched in real time as the first shadow of a terrible doubt fell across that love, a doubt that would grow, she sensed, into something that would burn this man's whole world to the ground before it was finished. Vincent Blackwell looked up at the maid who had walked into his restaurant and set a match to 25 years of certainty. "Go home, Emily Carter," he said, and it was the first time he had used her name, and it startled her that he knew it, that even in the chaos he had learned it. "Go home to your brother. Forget you ever came here. Forget my name. Because I promise you, whatever is inside this book, it is going to bring down a great deal of fire, and you do not want to be standing anywhere near me when it falls." Emily looked at him for a long moment. "She loved you," she said simply. "Whatever else is in there, I know that much for certain. A woman doesn't hold a book against her heart every night for a son she doesn't love. Whatever they told you, however they made you hate her, she loved you until the very last second of her life, and the last words out of her mouth were your name." Then she walked out of Aurelia and into the cold Chicago night, leaving Vincent Blackwell alone in an empty restaurant with a diary under his hand and the whole story of his life waiting to be rewritten. For a long time, he did not move. Then, slowly, in the golden silence, the most feared man in the city opened the leather cover, turned past the first page with his mother's handwriting, and began to read the letter she had written to him on the day she was forced to leave. And in the third line of that letter, Vincent Blackwell read a sentence that made his blood turn to ice, a sentence that told him the man who had raised him had not saved him from anything at all. The man who had raised him was the reason his mother had been torn away in the first place. The sentence in the third line of the letter was written in his mother's careful hand, and it read, "They told me if I did not sign the papers Richard put in front of me, I would never see you breathe again, and so I signed, and I have hated myself every day since." Vincent read it 3 times. He read it the way a man reads a word in a language he only half remembers, hoping that if he stares long enough, it will mean something other than what it plainly says. But the words did not change. They sat there on the page in his mother's handwriting, and every time he read them, the floor under his life dropped another inch. "Richard put in front of me, never see you breathe again." "No," Vincent said out loud to the empty restaurant. "No, that's not what happened." But there was no one there to argue with him, and the diary did not care what he believed. He set the book down and stood up so fast the chair went over behind him and clattered against the floor. He walked the length of the empty room and back, one hand pressed to his mouth, his mind running in 100 directions at once, and all of them leading to the same impossible place. For 25 years he had known one thing above all others. He had known that his mother abandoned him and Richard Hawthorne saved him. That was the bedrock. That was the ground everything else stood on. Richard had told him the story so many times it had become as fixed as his own name. "Your mother left. I stayed. Your mother chose herself. I chose you. Never forget who was there when the door closed, Adrian. Never forget who walked away and who remained." And Vincent had never forgotten. He had built a man out of that story. He had built an empire out of that man. Now a maid had walked into his restaurant, and a dead woman's handwriting was telling him the door had not closed on its own. Someone had closed it. And the someone had a name, and the name was the one he had trusted more than any name on earth. He came back to the table and made himself pick the diary up again. He turned the page. The next letter was dated 3 weeks after the first. "My darling Adrian," it began, "I don't know if you will ever read these. Richard's men watch the mail. I write them anyway, because if I stop writing to you, I will stop breathing, and I have promised myself I will stay alive long enough to find a way back to you. You are 7 years old today. I made a cake and I ate it alone in a room I am not allowed to leave, and I sang to you where no one could hear me." Vincent's hand was shaking so badly he had to set the book flat on the table to keep reading. There were dozens of them. 50, 100. He stopped counting. Letters for birthdays, letters for Christmases, letters for ordinary Tuesdays, when the only news was that she had seen a boy on the street who was about the right age and had followed him for 2 blocks before realizing it wasn't him and going home to cry. She had written him a letter every few weeks for 25 years, and she had never been able to send a single one. Vincent Blackwell, who had ordered men hurt and worse without his pulse rising, sat alone in a golden empty room and made a sound he had not made since he was a child, a low broken sound that came out of somewhere he had sealed shut. So long ago he had forgotten it existed. Then he heard the front door of the restaurant open. He was on his feet instantly, the grief gone from his face as if a switch had been thrown, the mask back down, because in his world grief was a wound, and wounds were where the knife went in. His hand was already moving toward his jacket when he saw who it was, and he stopped. It was Marcus. Marcus had been with him 11 years. Marcus ran the day-to-day, kept the books that could be shown and the books that could not, and was as close to a friend as a man like Vincent allowed himself. "Boss," Marcus said, taking in the overturned chair, the empty room, the open book on the table. "The guy said you cleared the place, middle of a Thursday, full house, cleared it for one woman with a book." He said it carefully, not quite a question. "I came to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine, Marcus." Marcus looked at the diary, then at Vincent's face, and did the thing that had kept him alive and useful for 11 years, which was to know exactly how far to push and not 1 inch further. "Who was she?" he asked. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you remember me ever talking about my mother?" Marcus blinked. In 11 years, he had never once heard Vincent Blackwell mention having a mother. As far as Marcus knew, the man had sprung fully formed from Richard Hawthorne's shadow. "No," Marcus said slowly. "Never." "She's dead," Vincent said. "She died in a nursing home on the north side, alone. The only person with her at the end was a maid who cleaned the floors." He touched the diary. "That maid was here 20 minutes ago. She brought me this. My mother spent the last months of her life holding it, and the last words she ever said were my name." Marcus did not know what to do with any of this. He had seen Vincent Blackwell in every state a man could be in, cold and dangerous and calculating. But he had never seen him like this, cracked open, raw, a man Marcus did not recognize wearing the face of a man he knew. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, because it seemed like the only true thing available. "Don't be sorry yet," Vincent said. "You haven't heard the part that matters." He picked up the book and held it. "For 25 years I have believed my mother abandoned me. I have believed Richard took me in out of the goodness of his heart when she walked away. This book says she didn't walk away. This book says Richard forced her to sign papers giving me up, threatened her life, threatened mine, made her disappear, and then told a 7-year-old boy that his mother left him because she felt nothing." The color drained out of Marcus's face. "Boss," he said carefully, you need to be careful here. A grieving woman writes things. People write things at the end. It doesn't mean." "I know it doesn't mean," Vincent snapped, then quieter. "I know. That's why I'm not going to burn Richard Hawthorne to the ground on the word of a diary. I'm not a child. I know how a lie can dress itself up as a mother's love. Maybe she did write herself into a story where she was the victim. Maybe it's easier to die believing you were stolen than to die knowing you left." He looked at the book. "But I have to know. Do you understand? I have to know which one is true. And there's only one way to find out." "Which is?" "The maid," Vincent said. "Emily Carter. Everything she told me I can check. If she's lying, if this is a con, if someone put her up to this, there'll be a seam somewhere. There always is. Nobody's story is clean." He grabbed his coat. "I want everything on Emily Carter, where she lives, where she works, who she owes money to, who she's talked to. If someone is using her to get to me, I'll find the string, and I'll follow it back to whoever's holding it. And if I find out this whole thing was built to make me turn on Richard, then God help the person who built it." Marcus nodded. This was familiar ground. This was the Vincent he knew. Suspicion was a language they both spoke fluently. "And if there's no string?" Marcus asked. Vincent stopped at the door. "Then everything I am is a lie," he said quietly, "and I'll have to decide what to do about that." He was gone before Marcus could answer. By the next morning, Vincent had a file. He read it in his office, a room with no windows and one door, and he read it looking for the crack. That was his gift and his curse. He could look at any story, any person, any deal, and find the place where it was rotten. He had never once been wrong. Everyone was hiding something. Everyone wanted something. The only question was ever how deep you had to dig to find it. He dug into Emily Carter, and he found the bottom fast, and there was nothing there. She was exactly what she had said she was. 26 years old, worked days cleaning houses for a service that paid barely above nothing, worked 4 nights a week at the Rosewood nursing home on the north side, rented a 1-bedroom apartment where she slept on a pull-out couch so her brother could have the bedroom. The brother, Daniel, 22, had been hurt 8 months ago at the packing plant where he worked. A crush injury to the leg, 3 surgeries, no insurance worth the name, a mountain of debt. Emily was carrying all of it. The rent, the medical bills, the food, the physical therapy the brother couldn't afford and did without. No criminal record, not so much as a parking ticket. No connections to any family Vincent had ever crossed. No debts to anyone in his world. No secret accounts. No sudden phone calls. No pattern that suggested she had been coached, positioned, aimed. She was just a poor girl who worked herself to the bone and had, for no reason at all except that she was the kind of person who did such things, sat beside a dying stranger and held her hand. Vincent read the file twice and then sat back and stared at the ceiling. He did not know what to do with a person who wanted nothing. His whole life had trained him to understand people through their wants. You found what a man wanted, and you had him. Money, power, safety, revenge, love, respect. It didn't matter. Everyone had a lever, and once you found it, you owned it. It was the first thing Richard had ever taught him. Everyone can be bought, Adrian. The only fools are the ones who don't know their own price. Emily Carter did not appear to have a price. She had walked into a room full of dangerous men, been grabbed and bruised and nearly thrown into the street, and she had done it to keep a promise to a woman who could no longer reward her for keeping it. There was nothing in it for her. There had never been anything in it for her. And that meant the diary was probably real. And that meant... Vincent shut the file. He did not let himself finish the thought. Not yet. Because there was one more thing he had to check. One piece he could verify with his own eyes, and until he did, he would not allow himself to believe. He drove to the Rosewood nursing home himself. He did not bring men. He walked in wearing a plain coat, and he asked at the desk about a former patient named Margaret Collins, and he said he was family. The woman at the desk was kind and tired, the way people who work in such places often are. "Oh," she said, and her face softened with real feeling. "Margaret, yes. She passed a little over a week ago. I'm so sorry. Were you close?" "No," Vincent said. It was the truest thing he had said in days. "I wasn't. I should have been." "Well," the woman said gently, "you should know she wasn't alone. There was a girl who worked nights here, Emily. She sat with Margaret all the time, way past her hours. She wasn't supposed to, honestly, but nobody had the heart to stop her because that woman had nobody, and Emily just..." The woman shook her head. "Some people are just like that. Margaret used to light up when Emily came in, called her the only friend she had left in the world." Vincent had to look away for a moment. "Did Margaret ever talk about a son?" he asked. The woman hesitated. "She talked about a boy, toward the end, but she was on a lot of medication and sometimes at the end people. They mix up the past. She'd say she had a son who was taken from her. She'd cry about it. We figured it was, confusion." The woman's eyes came up to Vincent's face and held there a beat too long, and something shifted in them. "She always said his name was Adrian." The floor dropped again. "Thank you," Vincent managed. He walked out of the Rosewood nursing home and sat in his car in the parking lot for a long time without turning the key. It was true. All of it. The maid was exactly who she said she was. His mother had been here alone for months, in his own city, 30 minutes from his house, crying about a son who had been taken from her, calling his name to strangers, and he had been eating dinner in a restaurant he owned and running an empire and had not known she existed. He had spent those same months believing she had abandoned him a quarter century ago and thinking of her, when he thought of her at all, with pure hatred. She had been 30 minutes away, and she had died calling his name, and he had not come, because Richard had told him she left. Vincent sat in the car, and the grief he had been holding back finally came, and he did not fight it. There was no one to see. For the first time since he was 7 years old, the man they called Vincent Blackwell wept, and he wept for the boy at the window, and for the mother who never stopped writing letters she couldn't send, and for the 25 years that a single lie had stolen from both of them. When it was over, something in him had changed, and it had gone cold in a way that was worse than any heat. He drove home, and he read the rest of the diary. It took him most of the night, and every page pulled him deeper. The letters went back further than he thought possible, all the way to before he was born, to a young woman named Margaret, who had fallen in love with a man named Thomas, his father. Vincent had almost no memory of his father, just a warmth, a big hand on his small shoulder, a voice. Thomas Collins had built a small business from nothing, a chain of neighborhood restaurants, honest ones, the real kind, and he had been proud of them, and he had been kind. And into that life had walked a man named Richard Hawthorne. Margaret's letters told the story slowly, in pieces, over years, the way a person circles a wound they can't bear to look at directly. Richard had come in as a partner, an investor, a friend. He had been charming, Margaret wrote, so charming that she had trusted him completely, and that was the thing she could never forgive herself for. She had let the wolf into the house and called him a friend. Richard had wanted the business. All of it. And Thomas would not sell, and then Thomas had died. Vincent's father had died when Vincent was 6 years old, and Vincent had been told all his life that it was an accident. A car, a wet road, a tragedy. Richard had told him the story himself, gravely, kindly. A man breaking terrible news to a boy. Your father died in an accident, Adrian. The road was wet. It was no one's fault. These things happen. Margaret's letter said something different. It said, I have never been able to prove it, and it has eaten me alive for 25 years. But I know in my bones that Richard killed your father. The brakes. There was a man, a mechanic, who wanted to talk to me after, who was frightened, who said the brakes had been. And then that man disappeared too, Adrian, before he could tell me what he knew. And I understood then exactly what kind of man Richard Hawthorne was, and I understood that I was next, and that you were all I had left to lose. Vincent read that page as the sun came up, and by the time he finished it, he was no longer weeping. He was somewhere past that. He sat in his dark house with the diary in his hands, and he thought about the man who had raised him. He thought about Richard's hand on his shoulder at his father's grave, a grave Richard had dug. He thought about every lesson Richard had ever taught him. Every night the older man had sat him down and shaped him, molded him, poured cold water on every soft thing in him, until the boy who cried at a window became the man who felt nothing at all. Emotions are weakness, Adrian. Love is a leash other people put on you. Trust no one. Need no one. The only man who can't be betrayed is the man who cares about nothing. Richard had not been teaching him to survive. Richard had been building himself a weapon. He had killed the father, stolen the business, banished the mother, and then he had taken the son and hollowed him out and filled him with ice and turned him into the thing that guarded and grew everything Richard had stolen. Vincent Blackwell was not Richard's son. Vincent Blackwell was Richard's masterpiece, his revenge on a dead man, made flesh, the final theft. He had not just stolen Thomas Collins's business and his wife. He had stolen his boy, and remade that boy into a man his own father would not have recognized. 25 years, Vincent had loved Richard Hawthorne like a father, and Richard Hawthorne had murdered his real one. Vincent got up from the chair and walked through his enormous, empty house, and he understood, with the terrible clarity of a man who has finally seen the whole shape of his life, that everything he owned was blood money. Not the ordinary blood of his trade, the blood he had made his peace with long ago. Older blood, his own blood. His father's blood was under the foundation of everything Richard had given him, everything Vincent had spent his life protecting and expanding, and he had never known. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was Richard. Vincent stood very still and let it ring, once, twice, 3 times. Looking at the name of the man who had killed his father lit up in his hand. Then, because 25 years of training does not fall away in a single night, and because he was not yet ready to show his hand, he answered it, and he made his voice into the voice Richard had taught him. Yeah, he said. There he is. Richard's voice was warm, gravelly, familiar as his own heartbeat, and it made Vincent's stomach turn over. I heard you cleared out Aurelia on a Thursday night. Full house. What happened? Some kind of trouble? Vincent's mind moved fast. Richard already knew. Of course Richard knew. Richard had eyes everywhere, always had, and there had been 50 witnesses in that restaurant. Woman came in causing a scene, Vincent said evenly, making threats. I didn't want it spilling onto the customers. Handled it quiet. A woman. Richard's voice didn't change, but Vincent had spent his whole life reading this man, and he heard it. The faint tightening, the fisherman feeling the line move. What did she want? Money, Vincent said. What do they ever want? Said she had information, wanted to get paid to keep quiet. Nothing to it. Some grifter with a story. What was the story? And there it was. The question under the question. Richard was not asking out of idle interest. Richard was afraid. Vincent could hear it now, could hear it the way you hear a note that's slightly off in a song you've known your whole life. Richard Hawthorne was afraid, and Richard Hawthorne was never afraid, and that fear told Vincent more than the entire diary had. Richard knew what the woman might have carried. Richard had spent 25 years waiting for exactly this call. The story was garbage, Vincent said, and he let a little boredom into his voice, the boredom of a man dismissing a nuisance. Something about my mother, said she had a diary, said my mother was some kind of saint, wanted me to pay her for it. I told my guys to put her out. Why, you worried about a con artist? There was a pause on the line, just a beat, but Vincent felt it like a held breath. Your mother, Richard said, and his voice had gone very gentle, very careful, the voice he had used to tell a 7-year-old his mother didn't love him. Adrian, we both know what your mother was. Don't let some woman with a sad story get in your head. You know how this works. They find the soft spot and they push. And I raised you not to have soft spots, didn't I? You did, Vincent said. So you handled it. Good. Where's the woman now? And that, Vincent understood in a cold flash, was the most dangerous question of all. Because Richard was not asking to be sure the problem was solved. Richard was asking where Emily Carter was, so that Richard could solve it himself, permanently, the way he had solved the mechanic 25 years ago, the way he solved everyone who got close to the truth. If Vincent gave up Emily's name, she was already dead. Gone, Vincent said. Threw her out, didn't get a name, some maid, nobody. You want me to chase down every street corner grifter who comes through the door now? No, Richard said after a moment. No, you're right. Waste of time. A warmth came back into his voice, but it was manufactured now, and for the first time in his life, Vincent could tell. Come by the house this week, huh? It's been too long. I don't like it when you go quiet on me, Adrian. Makes an old man nervous. I'll come by, Vincent said. Good boy. The line went dead. Vincent lowered the phone and stood in the gray morning light, and he understood two things with perfect clarity. The first was that Richard Hawthorne had killed his father and stolen his life, and was even now trying to find the one witness who could prove it, so that he could kill her too. The second was that Vincent had just lied to Richard for the first time in his life, and Richard had not caught it, and that meant the game had already begun, and only one of them knew it was being played. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked down at the diary on the table, at his mother's handwriting, at 25 years of love that had reached him at last, 1 week too late to say a single word back. And Vincent Blackwell, who had spent his whole life believing that revenge was the only justice a man like him would ever get, felt the first stirrings of something he did not yet have a name for, something that would take him the rest of this story to understand. Then his phone buzzed again. Not Richard this time. A number he didn't know. He almost didn't answer, but something made him. Yeah. Mr. Blackwell? It was Emily's voice, and it was wrong. It was tight and fast and frightened. The voice of someone speaking low so they won't be overheard. It's Emily. Emily Carter. I'm sorry. I know you told me to forget your name. I'm sorry to call, but I didn't know who else. There's a man outside my building. Every muscle in Vincent's body went still. What man? He said. I don't know. He's been there since last night. He's sitting in a car across the street, and he's watching my windows. My neighbor said he asked her about me, asked which apartment was mine, asked when I get home from work, asked about my brother. Her breath hitched. I told myself I was being paranoid, but then this morning I found the lock on the building door had been. Somebody tried the door, Mr. Blackwell. Somebody tried to get in, and I have my brother here, and he can't even walk, and I— Listen to me, Vincent said, and his voice had changed completely, gone flat and hard and absolutely calm, the voice of a man for whom this specific kind of problem was the water he swam in. Emily, Listen, are the doors locked right now? Yes. Is your brother with you? Yes. He's in the other room. He doesn't know. Keep it that way. Don't tell him yet. Don't open the door for anyone. Not anyone. Not police, not maintenance, not a delivery. No one. Do you understand me? I don't care who they say they are. You're scaring me. Good, Vincent said. Because you should be scared, and you should do exactly what I say. I'm coming to you right now. It's going to take me 20 minutes. Can you give me 20 minutes? There was a silence, and then a small voice. The man in the car just got out. Vincent was already moving, already grabbing his coat, already halfway to the door, the diary shoved into his inside pocket against his chest. Where is he now? Vincent said. Emily, where is he right now? He's crossing the street, she whispered. He's coming toward the building. Oh God, he's coming to the door. I can see him from the window. Emily, he's holding something. Mr. Blackwell, he's got something in his hand and I can't. And then the line went silent. Not dead, but silent. The specific silence of someone who has stopped talking because they are listening to a sound at their own front door. And in that silence, Vincent Blackwell ran for his car with his mother's diary over his heart and his father's murderer's phone call still ringing in his ears. And he understood exactly who had sent the man across that street and exactly how little time was left. Vincent drove like a man who had stopped believing in traffic laws. He had the phone pressed to his ear the whole way, and the silence on the other end was the worst sound he had ever heard because it was not empty. He could hear Emily breathing. He could hear the small sounds of a person pressed against a door, listening to another person on the other side of it. Emily, he said, low and steady, talk to me. Don't hang up. Just breathe and tell me what you hear. Her voice came back in a whisper so thin it was almost nothing. He knocked, twice. He said he's from the building management. He said there's a water leak and he needs to check the pipes. There's no leak, Vincent said. You know there's no leak. Do not open that door. I'm not opening it. Her breath shook. Daniel heard the knock. He's asking who it is. I told him it's nothing. I don't know how long I can. Where's your brother right now? In the bedroom. He can't come to the door fast. His leg. He has to use the crutches. It takes him a minute to even stand up. Good. Keep him there. Vincent ran a red light and a horn screamed somewhere behind him, and he did not slow down. How many locks on your door? 2, the knob and a deadbolt. But the deadbolt's old. It barely. Is there a chain? No. Vincent's jaw tightened. Okay. Listen to me very carefully. Is there anything you can put in front of the door? Anything heavy? A dresser, a table, anything you can drag? There was a scraping sound and a grunt of effort, and Emily's voice came back strained. I'm moving the bookshelf. It's heavy. Then a new sound came through the phone, and Vincent's blood ran cold, because it was the sound of a lock being worked. Not knocked on. Worked. Metal on metal, patient and skilled. The man at the door had stopped pretending there was a leak. The man at the door was a professional, and he was picking the lock. He's got a tool in the lock, Emily breathed, and now the panic was breaking through. Mr. Blackwell, he's picking the lock. Oh God, he's actually... How far are you from being able to block the door? The shelf's too heavy. I can't move it fast enough, Then get your brother, Vincent said. Get your brother and get to the farthest room from that door and lock yourselves in and put everything you can against it. Do it now, Emily. Do it now and don't stop for anything. He heard the phone move, heard her running, heard her calling her brother's name in a voice that was trying not to sound like the voice of someone whose door was about to open. He heard Daniel's confused questions and Emily's sharp, terrified answers, and under all of it, faint but unmistakable, he heard the front door of the apartment click open. The man was inside. Vincent was 4 minutes away. Emily, he said. Emily, talk to me. We're in the bathroom, she whispered. It's the only door with a lock. Daniel's with me. I've got him. There's nothing in here. There's nothing to put against the door. It's just a bathroom. Oh God, I can hear him walking around out there. Listen to me. Vincent's voice was the calmest it had ever been in his life, because he had learned long ago that a man's calm is the only gift he can give another person in the moment before everything comes apart. You are going to be okay. I am almost there. I need you to be quiet now, completely quiet. Put your hand over Daniel's mouth if you have to. Turn your phone all the way down. I'm going to stay on the line, but you can't talk anymore. Do you understand? Squeeze the phone if you understand." He heard nothing, but he trusted that she understood. And then he heard, distant and tinny through the phone, a man's voice on the other side of a bathroom door, calm and almost kind, the way the truly dangerous ones always were. "Emily," the voice said. "Emily Carter. I know you're in there. There's no need for any of this. I just want the book. You give me the book, and I walk out that door, and you and your brother go on with your lives. Nobody has to get hurt over an old woman's diary." Vincent's hands went white on the wheel. So there it was. Confirmation, if he had needed any. Richard had not wasted an hour. Richard had heard the words diary and mother and had sent a man to erase the problem before the sun was fully up. The same playbook, 25 years later. Find the person who knows the truth. Make them disappear. But there was a flaw in Richard's plan, and the flaw was this. The diary was not in that apartment. The diary was in Vincent's coat, over his heart, and the man breaking down a bathroom door to find it was about to come up empty. And when Richard's men came up empty, they did not leave politely. They cleaned up. They made sure the person who might talk could not talk, which meant Emily and her crippled brother had maybe 2 minutes to live. Vincent took the last corner so hard the tires screamed, and Emily's building came into view. "I want the book, Emily," the man's voice said through the phone, and it was closer now, right at the bathroom door. "Last time I asked nice." Then the sound of a shoulder hitting wood. Vincent abandoned the car in the middle of the street with the door hanging open and the engine running, and he went through the front door of the building and up the stairs 3 at a time. And he was not calm anymore, not inside. But his body knew exactly what to do because his body had been trained by the very man who had sent this killer, and there was a terrible symmetry in that which Vincent did not have time to feel. Second floor. Emily had said second floor, apartment 2C. The door of 2C was standing open. Vincent went through it silent and fast, and he saw the man at the end of the short hall, a big man, a professional, throwing his weight against a flimsy bathroom door that was already splintering at the hinge, and Vincent covered the distance between them before the man even knew he was there. The man was good. He heard Vincent at the last half second and turned, and he had a gun coming up, and in the narrow hall there was no room and no time. And Vincent did the only thing there was to do, which was to hit the man's arm as the gun came up, so the shot went into the wall instead of into Vincent's chest. And then the two of them went down together in a tangle in the small space. And it was ugly and close and fast, the way real violence always is, nothing like the movies. Just 2 men in 40 seconds, and the question of which one would be breathing at the end. Inside the bathroom, Emily heard the gunshot and screamed, and she pulled Daniel against her and put her body between her brother and the door, and she waited to die. Then the sounds outside stopped. There was a long, terrible silence. Emily held her breath. Daniel was shaking against her. And then a voice, ragged, out of breath, but unmistakable. "Emily, it's me. It's Vincent. It's over. You can open the door." She did not move for a moment. She could not make her hands work. Then she reached out and unlocked the bathroom door and pulled it open, and she saw Vincent Blackwell standing in the wreckage of her hallway, his coat torn, blood on his knuckles, and a man lying very still on the floor behind him. Emily looked at the man on the floor. "Is he?" she started, and couldn't finish. "He's alive," Vincent said. "He's not getting up for a while, but he's alive. I need him alive." He looked at her, and then at the young man behind her, pale and terrified, gripping his crutches. "You must be Daniel." Daniel could only nod. Vincent turned back to Emily, and for a moment the mask was gone entirely, and what was underneath it was something she had not expected. Guilt. Raw, naked guilt. "This is my fault," he said. "This happened because of me. Because you did a kind thing for a dying woman, and that kindness led you to me, and I brought this to your door." He looked at the man on the floor. "The man who sent him, the man who's been in charge of my whole life, decided you were a loose end the second he heard the word diary. That's what he does. That's what he's always done. Anyone who knows the truth about him, he erases. He did it 25 years ago, and he tried to do it to you this morning. Emily was staring at him, and slowly the pieces were coming together in her frightened mind. "The man who raised you," she said. "Richard. You said his name was Richard." "Richard Hawthorne," Vincent said. "And I know now that everything in that diary is true. I checked all of it. Your story, where you worked, my mother, alone in that nursing home, 30 minutes from my house, crying about a son who was taken from her." His voice caught just slightly. "And now the man who took me from her sent a professional to kill you before the sun came up. So no, I don't have any more doubts, Emily. I have certainty. And certainty, in my line of work, is a very dangerous thing to give a man like me." He crouched down by the man on the floor and searched him, quick and expert, and came up with a phone. He held it up. "This," he said, "is going to tell me exactly who this man called this morning, and who called him, and I already know whose number I'm going to find." He straightened up. "But first, I'm getting you and your brother out of here. You can't stay in this city, not for a while. Pack a bag, both of you, whatever you can carry in 5 minutes. I have a place. It's safe. It's the one place on earth Richard doesn't know about, because it's the one thing I ever kept from him." Emily didn't move. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why are you helping us? You told me to forget your name. You told me to go home and stay away from you. Now there's a man bleeding on my floor, and you're telling me to run. I don't understand why you do any of this for 2 people you met yesterday." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. "Because yesterday," he said quietly, "you did something for my mother that I should have been doing for the last 25 years. You sat with her. You held her hand. You made sure she wasn't alone at the end, when her own son didn't even know she was dying. I can't ever pay that back. There's no amount of money, no favor, nothing. But I can make sure the same man who took her from me doesn't take you too. That much I can do. So please, pack a bag." And something in the way he said it, some crack in the voice of a man who never cracked, made Emily believe him. They were out of the building in 7 minutes, Daniel between them on his crutches, and Vincent put them in a car that one of his people brought around, and he gave instructions in a low voice. And then Emily and her brother were driven away to a place with a name Vincent didn't say out loud. And Vincent Blackwell was left standing on the sidewalk with a killer's phone in his hand and a fire in his chest that had been waiting 25 years to catch. He looked at the phone. He scrolled to the recent calls. And there it was. 2 calls that morning. 1 incoming, 1 outgoing. The same number for both. A number Vincent had known by heart since he was 7 years old. Richard. Richard had called this man 20 minutes after hanging up with Vincent. 20 minutes after Vincent had said the word diary. Richard hadn't even waited an hour. He had heard that his life's great secret might be exposed, and he had reached for the same solution he always reached for, and he had reached for it fast. Vincent stood there and felt the last piece of his old life fall away. There was no more room for doubt. No more room for the small, desperate, childish hope that maybe there was an explanation. Maybe Richard had a reason. Maybe the man Vincent had loved as a father wasn't the monster the diary described. That hope had died on Emily Carter's bathroom floor. The proof was in his hand. Richard Hawthorne had ordered the murder of an innocent woman and her disabled brother to protect a secret 25 years old. The secret that he had murdered Thomas Collins and stolen his son. Vincent got in his car, and he drove. And he did not drive toward Richard, though every cell in his body was screaming at him to. He drove toward the one place he could think clearly. He drove toward the safe house because there was one more thing he needed to do before this became a war, and it involved the diary, and it involved Emily. Because there had been a page, near the end of the diary, a page that Vincent had read at 4 a.m. and had not been able to fully understand because his mother had written it in fragments, in fear, in the shorthand of a woman who suspected her words might be read by the wrong eyes. The page had mentioned a recording, not letters, not memories, a recording, something his mother had made or acquired near the very end, something she had hidden, something she had written about only in the most guarded terms. Adrian, if you are reading this, and if you have found your way to the truth, then you must find the rest of it. I could not put it in writing. It was too dangerous. but I have kept it safe. Look for the thing I loved most in the world besides you, the thing that always played our song." Vincent had read that line a dozen times and could not crack it. But Emily could, because Emily had lived in that nursing home room for months. Emily had known Margaret Collins in her final days. Emily had fixed something for her, hadn't she? She had said it herself that first night in the empty restaurant when she was trying to prove she was telling the truth. She had said, "I fixed her broken radio, the one that only played the old jazz stations, the thing that always played our song." Vincent's foot pressed down on the gas. When he arrived at the safe house, a quiet property well outside the city that existed under a name that had nothing to do with him, Emily was standing at the window, still pale, still shaken, and Daniel was resting on a couch with his leg up. Vincent came in fast and crossed to Emily without preamble. "The radio," he said. She blinked at him. "What?" "Margaret's radio, the one you fixed, the one that played the jazz stations. Where is it? Is it still in her room? Did the nursing home keep it? Did they throw it out? Where is that radio, Emily? I need to know right now." Something in his urgency frightened her all over again. I don't know. When she died, they cleared out her room, her things. There was no family to claim anything, so they—" She stopped and her eyes went wide. "Wait, no, the radio, I have it." Vincent went very still. "You have it." "She gave it to me," Emily said slowly, remembering. "About a week before she died, one of the last clear days she had. She pressed it into my hands and she said, 'I want you to have this, Emily. This was the most important thing I owned. Promise me you'll keep it safe. Promise me you'll never let it go.' I thought it was just, the medication, an old woman getting sentimental about a broken radio she loved. I thought it was just a radio." Her voice dropped. "It's in the bag." "The bag I packed. It was on my shelf and I couldn't leave it because I promised her, so I grabbed it. It's in the bag I brought." Vincent closed his eyes for a moment. His mother had hidden the most dangerous evidence of Richard Hawthorne's crimes inside a broken radio, and then, sensing the end coming, had given that radio to the one person in the world she trusted, the poor maid who sat with her and asked for nothing. And Emily had carried it out of a burning building without even knowing what it was, because she had made a promise. Everything in this story, Vincent thought, came down to promises kept by people with nothing to gain from keeping them. "Get it," he said quietly. "Please." Emily brought the radio. It was old and scratched, the kind of thing you'd find in a thrift store for $2. Vincent turned it over in his hands, and he found what he was looking for almost immediately, because he knew how to look. The back panel had been opened before and resealed. The screws were newer than the radio. Someone had been inside this thing, and recently. He got a screwdriver from one of his men and opened it. Inside, tucked into the space where the batteries should have gone, wrapped in a small plastic bag, was an old cassette tape and a folded piece of paper. Vincent unfolded the paper first. It was his mother's handwriting, and it was shakier than the diary, the hand of a woman very close to the end. "Adrian," it read, "if you are holding this, then Emily found you, and I was right to trust her. This tape is the truth about your father. It is a recording of Richard, made without his knowledge in the weeks before he forced me away. On it, he says what he did. He confesses to all of it, thinking no one but I could hear. I could never use it. I had no power, and he had all of it, and I knew that if I ever tried, he would kill me and take you completely. And I would rather live in exile knowing you were alive than die and leave you to him fully. But you are not powerless, my son. Whatever you have become, you are not powerless. So I leave this to you. Use it or don't. Forgive me or don't. But know that I never left you, not for one single day. Every day of my life, I was your mother, even when I was not allowed to be. I love you, Adrian. I have always loved you, and I am so, so sorry." Vincent read it standing perfectly still, and when he finished, he did not speak for a long time. Then he found something in the safe house that could play a cassette tape, an old machine that took him 20 minutes to locate and get working, and he sat down, and Emily sat across from him, and he pressed play. There was static at first, the hiss of an old tape, and then a voice, his mother's voice, young, 25 years younger, alive. "You did it, didn't you?" she said. "The brakes. You did it, Richard. Tell me the truth for once in your life. You killed Thomas." And then another voice, Richard's voice. Younger too, but unmistakably the same voice that had called Vincent that very morning and called him good boy. And the voice said, in a tone so casual, so utterly without remorse, that it turned Emily's stomach, even though she had never met the man. "Of course I did, Margaret. He wouldn't sell. Men who won't sell become obstacles, and I remove obstacles. It was nothing personal. It was business. And now you're going to sign these papers, and you're going to give me the boy. And you're going to disappear. Because if you don't, the same thing that happened to your husband is going to happen to you, and your son will grow up an orphan instead of just motherless. Your choice. You have until morning." The tape hissed on into silence. Vincent reached out and stopped it. For a long moment, no one in the room breathed. Emily had her hand pressed over her mouth. Daniel, on the couch, was staring at the machine in horror. And Vincent Blackwell sat with his hands flat on his knees, looking at the old cassette player. And on his face was an expression Emily had never seen on a human being before, and hoped she would never see again. It was the face of a man who had just heard the murder of his father confessed in the voice of the man who raised him. 25 years, Vincent said very softly. He killed my father. He stood at the grave and put his hand on my shoulder and told me it was an accident. He told me my mother left because she didn't love me. He took everything, and then he took me, and he made me into the thing that guarded everything he stole. I have spent my entire life as the loyal son of the man who murdered my father. He looked up at Emily, and his eyes were dry now, and that was somehow worse than tears. And he found out yesterday that the truth might come out. And his very first move, the very first thing he did, was try to have you killed. You and your brother. 2 innocent people. Because that's what he does. That's all he's ever done. Emily didn't know what to say. There were no words for what she had just heard. "What are you going to do?" she asked finally. Vincent stood up. He picked up the tape and the diary and held them both, the 2 halves of the truth his mother had left him, one made of words and one made of a killer's own voice. "I'm going to see him," Vincent said. "I'm going to go to the house where he raised me, and I'm going to sit across from the man who murdered my father, and I'm going to look him in the eye." His voice was terrifyingly calm. "He's been calling me. He wants me to come by. He said it's been too long. He said it makes an old man nervous when I go quiet." A muscle moved in Vincent's jaw. "So I'm going to give him what he wants. I'm going to go quiet no longer. I'm going to walk into that house, and I'm finally going to have the conversation we've been building toward for 25 years, and only one of us knows it's coming." "Vincent," Emily said, and it was the first time she had used his first name, and it stopped him. "He's already tried to kill me over this. If you walk in there and he sees the truth on your face, he'll try to kill you too, his own son. You said it yourself, that's all he's ever done. Please, don't walk into his house alone." Vincent looked at her, this maid who had every reason to run from him and his violent world, standing in a safe house she'd been driven to in the back of a stranger's car, and who was, even now, even after everything, worried about him. "You know," he said slowly, "that's the second time in 2 days you've cared about what happens to me. And I can't for the life of me figure out why. I'm not a good man, Emily. Whatever Richard made me, I let him make me. I've done things. You should be running from me, not warning me." "Maybe," Emily said, "but your mother didn't think you were beyond saving. She spent 25 years believing there was still a son worth finding, and she was the best person I ever knew. So I'm going to trust her judgment over yours." Something moved across Vincent's face, something raw and unguarded, and for a moment, the mafia boss was gone entirely, and there was only Adrian, the boy at the window, the boy his mother had never stopped writing to. "I have to go to him," he said, "but I promise you this. I'm not going to walk in and do the thing my whole life has trained me to do. I'm not going to become him. He killed to take. If I kill to take back, then he wins, because then I'm just what he built. My mother didn't leave me this tape so I could put a bullet in Richard Hawthorne. Anyone can do that. She left it to me because it's the truth, and the truth is the one weapon that man was never able to steal, control, or kill." He put the tape in his pocket, next to the diary, next to his heart. "So I'm not going to murder him. He walked to the door and stopped, his hand on the frame. "I'm going to do something that will hurt him far worse," Vincent said. "I'm going to take everything he built, everything he stole, everything he loves, and I'm going to burn it down in the light of day where everyone can see. I'm going to expose him, and then I'm going to watch the man who taught me that fear is the only power lose everything to the one thing he never respected." He looked back at Emily one last time. "Stay here," he said. "Keep the doors locked. Don't let anyone in but me. If I'm not back by morning." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Then Vincent Blackwell walked out of the safe house and got in his car and drove toward the great house on the hill where a killer was waiting for his son to come home, not knowing that his son already knew everything and was coming not as a son at all, but as the last and only witness his father's victim had left behind. The house on the hill had not changed in 25 years, and neither had the feeling Vincent got walking into it, that old childhood feeling of a place that was beautiful and cold at the same time, a place where love was something you earned and never quite finished paying for. Richard was in the study, the room where he had sat Vincent down 1,000 times and poured lessons into him like cement into a mold. He was older now, his hair fully white, his hands spotted with age, but his eyes were the same, sharp and pale and patient, the eyes of a man who had never once in his life doubted his right to take whatever he wanted. "There he is," Richard said, and he smiled, and he opened his arms the way he always had. And for 25 years, Vincent had walked into those arms and called this man his father. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten your way home." Vincent stopped in the middle of the room. He did not walk into the arms. Richard noticed. Of course he noticed. Richard noticed everything. "Sit," Richard said, lowering his arms smoothly, as if he had never raised them. "Have a drink with me. You look tired, Adrian. You've been running yourself ragged over that business the other night, a woman with a book." He shook his head, pouring 2 glasses of something amber. "I told you not to let it in your head, and here you are with your head full of it. I can see it on your face." "Can you?" Vincent said. "I raised you," Richard said. "I know every look you have. I know the one you're wearing right now." He held out a glass. "It's the look you get when someone's told you a story and you're not sure what to believe. So let me help you. Sit down and tell me what the woman said, and I'll tell you what's true and what isn't, like I always have." Vincent did not take the glass. He walked to the window instead and stood with his back to the man who had murdered his father, looking out at the grounds where he had learned to be cold. "Do you remember teaching me about levers?" Vincent said. "You must have told me 100 times. Everyone has a lever. Find what a man wants, and you own him. Money, safety, love, revenge. Everyone has a price. The only fools are the ones who don't know their own." "It's true," Richard said. "It's the truest thing I ever taught you." "I met someone who doesn't have one," Vincent said. "The maid, Emily, the woman with the book. I did what you taught me. I pulled her whole life apart looking for the lever, looking for what she wanted, who was using her, what the con was." He turned around. "There wasn't one, Richard. There wasn't a con. There wasn't an angle. She's just a poor girl who sat with a dying woman because no one else would. She wanted nothing. Do you understand how strange that was for me? I stood there looking at a person with no price, and for the first time in my life, your lessons didn't explain what I was looking at." Richard's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes did. "Everyone has a price, Adrian," he said. "You just didn't dig deep enough." "No," Vincent said. "That's the thing. I dug all the way to the bottom, and you know what I found at the bottom? Not her price. Yours." The room went very quiet. "I found out what you wanted, Richard," Vincent said, and his voice was calm, terribly calm. 25 years ago, you wanted my father's business, and he wouldn't sell. And you told me your favorite lesson so many times that I finally understood it the way you meant it. Men who won't sell become obstacles, and you remove obstacles." Richard set his glass down slowly. "That woman filled your head with poison," he said. "I warned you. A grieving stranger, a sad little book, and now you're standing in my house repeating fairy tales your mother invented to make herself feel better about walking out on her own child. Adrian, look at me. Look at me. Who was there when she left? Who stayed? Who fed you, taught you, made you everything you are? Her or me? You, Vincent said. Then trust that. Trust the man who stayed. I did trust you, Vincent said. That's what I can't forgive, not what you did to my father, not even what you did to my mother. I can almost understand those. You wanted something and you took it, and that's who you are. You never pretended otherwise. Not really. He took a step closer. What I can't forgive is that you took a 7-year-old boy who was standing at a window crying for his mother, and you told him she left because she felt nothing when she looked at his face. You looked at a child in the worst moment of his life and you saw a lever, and you pulled it. You pulled it for 25 years. Richard's face had gone still now, all the warmth draining out of it. And what was left was the thing Vincent had never let himself see, the cold machine that had been there the whole time under the fatherly smile. You want to know the truth? Richard said, and his voice had changed, dropped the warmth entirely, and it was almost a relief because it was finally honest. Fine, you're a grown man. Here's the truth. Yes, your father wouldn't sell, so I made him sell the only way that was left. Yes, I made your mother sign the boy over because a widow with a child is soft and predictable, and I couldn't have her raising you into some sentimental fool who'd give it all away. And yes, I told you she left you. Because a boy who thinks his mother abandoned him has something to prove. A boy who thinks his mother was stolen from him has something to grieve, and grief makes men weak. But the need to prove yourself, Adrian, that makes men into weapons. He spread his spotted hands. And look what I made. Look what you became. You want to stand there and be angry at me for that? You are the most powerful man in this city because of what I did. You should be thanking me. Thanking you, Vincent repeated. I took a crying boy and I made him a king, Richard said. Everything you have, everything you are, I built. Without me, you'd have grown up poor and soft and forgettable, cleaning floors like your little maid, dying in some nothing job in some nothing life. I gave you the world. So don't you dare stand in my house and judge me for the method. The method worked. You're the proof. And there it was. The whole thing, laid out plainly, without shame, without apology. The murder, the theft, the lie, the deliberate hollowing out of a child, all of it presented not as a crime, but as a gift Vincent should be grateful for. For a long moment, Vincent said nothing. And Richard, who had spent his whole life reading people, made his first real mistake. He read the silence as doubt. He thought his old magic was working, thought the lever was still there, thought that 25 years of conditioning would hold the way it always had. Come here, Richard said, gentling his voice again, reaching for the old rhythm. Come here, son. Put down whatever that woman gave you. Forget the book. It's you and me, the way it's always been. Nobody understands you like I do. Nobody ever will. That maid, she doesn't know you. She sees a story, a lost boy she can save. But I know what you really are, because I made it. You're like me, Adrian. You always have been. So let's stop this. Let's fix it the way we fix everything. Where's the woman? Where's the book? Tell me, and I'll make all of this go away, and tomorrow it'll be like none of it ever happened. And in that question, Vincent heard everything he needed to hear, because even now, even confessing, even reaching for his son with open arms, Richard's real question was the same as it had been that morning. Where is the woman? Where is the loose end? Let me erase her, and the boy, and the book, and the truth, the way I erase everything. Vincent looked at him and felt the last thread break, the very last one, the thin, invisible thread of a child's love for the only father he had ever known. And when it broke, he did not feel rage. That was the thing that surprised him. He had come up the hill expecting rage. Instead, he felt a great and terrible calm, the calm of a man who has finally stopped hoping, and in that calm, he understood exactly what his mother had been trying to tell him with a diary and a tape and a broken radio. You want to know where the woman is, Vincent said quietly. You want to finish it. One phone call, and Emily Carter and her brother disappear, and the book disappears, and the last witness to what you did is gone, and you win again, the way you always win. He shook his head slowly. That's what you are. You've been the same man your whole life. You see a threat, you erase it. My father was a threat, so you erased him. My mother was a threat, so you erased her. A mechanic who knew about the brakes was a threat, so you erased him too, didn't you? And this morning a maid became a threat, so you sent a man to erase her before breakfast. It never changes. It never stops. It's the only thing you know how to do. Richard's eyes narrowed. How do you know about the mechanic? And that was the moment. That was the small crack in the armor, the flash of alarm, the realization dawning on Richard Hawthorne that his son knew more than a Maid story could possibly have told him. Because my mother knew, Vincent said. She knew everything, Richard. For 25 years she knew what you were, and she was too afraid and too powerless to do anything about it, because you had all the power and she had none. So she waited. She kept the truth safe, and she waited, and she prayed that one day it would reach the one person in the world who wasn't powerless. He reached into his coat, and it did. He took out the cassette tape and held it up. Richard went very still. You confessed, Vincent said. 25 years ago, to her, on tape. You told her you killed my father because he wouldn't sell. You said it was nothing personal, it was business. You threatened to kill her, too. She recorded all of it, and she hid it, and she gave it to a poor maid who sat with her while she died. And this morning, that maid carried it out of the building your man was trying to break into. He turned the tape slowly in his fingers. So no, Richard. I don't need to know where the woman is. I already have everything she was carrying. It's not in an apartment where your men can find it. It's right here, over my heart, where my mother's letters are. The color left Richard's face. For the first time in Vincent's memory, the man looked old, not distinguished, not powerful, old and cornered and afraid, and Vincent watched the calculations run behind those pale eyes, the same calculations Richard had run his whole life, looking for the angle, the lever, the way out. You won't use it, Richard said, and his voice had lost its certainty. Think, Adrian. Think about what's on that tape. If it comes out, it doesn't just bury me. It's your father's murder, but everything after it. The business, the empire, all of it is built on that. You expose me, you expose yourself. Everything you have unravels. Every man who works for you, every deal, every dollar, all of it traces back to the foundation I built. And that foundation is on that tape. You'd be burning down your own house. You're not stupid enough to do that. I didn't raise a man who burns down his own house. And this was Richard's last lever, his final play, the assumption that his son loved his empire the way Richard loved it, that Vincent would protect the stolen kingdom because it was his now, that in the end, blood money was still money and power was still power, and no one who had tasted it would ever give it up. It was, Vincent realized, the truest thing Richard had said all night, because the old Vincent, the Vincent of a week ago, would never have done it. The old Vincent would have taken the tape and used it as leverage, kept Richard on a leash with it, maybe eventually killed him and taken the whole empire clean. That was the move. That was what Richard had trained him to do. Protect the house, grow the house, never ever burn the house. You're right, Vincent said. A week ago you'd have been right. A week ago I'd have kept this tape in a safe and used it to own you for the rest of your life. I'd have protected the house. That's what you built me to do. He looked at the tape. But then a woman I'd never met walked into my restaurant and gave me back my mother, 1 week too late to say a word to her. And I sat up all night reading 25 years of letters from a woman who wrote to me every few weeks and never once got to send a single one. And I heard her voice on this tape, young, alive, terrified, doing the one brave thing she could do in a life you'd taken everything else from. His voice thickened, and I finally understood the last thing she was trying to teach me, the thing you spent 25 years making sure I'd never learn. And what's that? Richard said, and there was contempt in it, but under the contempt there was fear. That there are things worth more than the house, Vincent said. You taught me that power is the only thing that matters, that love is a leash, that the man who cares about nothing can never be beaten, and you were so convincing that I believed it for 25 years. But it was always a lie, and here's how I know. You spent your whole life winning, taking, removing obstacles, building an empire on bodies, And at the end of all of it, at the end of all that power, you're standing in a room begging a man you lied to for a quarter century not to tell the truth about you. That's what all your power bought you. That's where the road ends. Alone in a house, terrified of a maid and a book and a tape, with no one who loves you and no one you love. He shook his head. My mother had nothing. No power, no money, no freedom. She died in a nursing home that everyone forgot. And she was richer than you'll ever be. Because there was one person on this earth who loved her enough to sit with her at the end, and one person who loved her enough to carry her truth out of a burning building, and one person, finally, at the very end, who came to understand that she never stopped loving him. His eyes met Richard's. You'll die with more money than God, Richard, and not one person on earth will grieve you. That's the lever you never understood. That's the price you didn't know you were paying the whole time. Richard's hand had drifted, slowly, toward the drawer of his desk, and Vincent saw it, and did not move to stop it, because part of him almost wanted it, almost wanted the old man to give him a reason. Go ahead, Vincent said quietly. There's a gun in that drawer. You keep it there. You showed it to me when I was 12, remember? Taught me a man should always be able to end a threat that walks into his home. So go ahead. End the threat. Shoot your son. It's the only move you have left, and it's the only kind of move you've ever known. But understand something before you do. He nodded toward the door, toward the window, toward the world outside. Copies. You taught me that too. Never keep the only copy of anything. So if I don't walk out of this house tonight, the tape goes to every newspaper, every prosecutor, every enemy you've ever made, all at once. First thing in the morning. Kill me, and you don't bury the truth. You broadcast it. So make your choice, old man. But you're out of levers. For the first time in your life, there's nothing left to pull. Richard's hand stopped on the edge of the drawer, and the two of them stood there, the murderer and the man he'd made, and the whole 25 years hung in the air between them, and slowly, slowly, Richard's hand came away from the drawer empty, and Vincent watched the last of the fight go out of the man who had ruled his entire life. What do you want? Richard said, and his voice was small now, the voice of a cornered old man. Money, the businesses. Whatever you want, take it. It's yours. Just give me the tape. We can make a deal. Everything is a deal, Adrian. You know that. I taught you that. There's always a deal. That's the difference between us, Vincent said. You still think this is a negotiation. You think everything can be bought. Even now, even this. But there's nothing you have that I want, Richard. You don't have anything I want. Because the only thing I ever wanted, you killed 25 years ago and told me she left. He put the tape back in his coat. There's no deal. There's no lever. There's just the truth finally in the light, where you could never stand it. He turned to go. Adrian, Richard said, and there was something almost pleading in it now. Adrian, son. Vincent stopped at the door, but he did not turn around. Don't call me that, he said. You don't get to call me son. You never earned it. You stole it. My father called me Adrian. My mother called me Adrian. And you took their word and put it in your mouth and used it as a leash for 25 years. He was quiet for a moment. My name is Vincent. You made Vincent. And Vincent is the man who's going to take everything you built and give it back to the light. But somewhere under Vincent, there's still a little of Adrian left. My mother found him. A maid found him, and that's the part of me you could never touch, no matter how hard you tried, because it was the part that belonged to them and never to you. And then Vincent Blackwell walked out of the house on the hill for the last time, leaving Richard Hawthorne alone in his study with all his money and all his power and none of his levers, and he did not look back. He drove down the hill with the tape over his heart, and he did not go to the police first, and he did not go to the newspapers first. He went to the safe house first, because there was someone he needed to tell, someone who had earned the right to hear it before the rest of the world. Emily was waiting at the window when his headlights swept across it, and she had the door open before he reached it, and the relief on her face when she saw him whole and alive was so total, so unguarded, that it stopped him on the threshold. You're alive, she said. You're okay. I've been standing at this window for hours. I thought, she stopped, I thought maybe you weren't coming back. I told him everything, Vincent said. He confessed, To my face. Everything the diary said, everything on the tape, all of it. He stood there and admitted it and told me I should thank him for it. He shook his head slowly, still not quite believing it. And then he offered me money to bury it, right to the end. He never understood. He thought there was a price. There was never a price. What are you going to do? Vincent came inside and sat down heavily, the exhaustion of 25 years finally landing on him all at once. I'm going to do the hardest thing I've ever done, he said. I'm going to tell the truth, all of it, even the parts that bury me too. Because Richard was right about one thing. That tape doesn't just end him. Everything I have is built on what he did. If I expose him, I expose myself. The businesses, the money, all of it comes apart. 25 years of my life comes apart. He looked at his hands. And I'm going to do it anyway. Because my mother spent her whole life powerless, holding the truth, unable to use it, praying it would reach someone who could. And it reached me. And if I sit on it to protect myself, to protect the empire that man built on my father's body, then I'm not her son. I'm his, and I would rather lose everything and be Adrian than keep everything and be what Richard made. Emily sat down across from him, and for a while neither of them said anything. You know, she said finally, when I walked into that restaurant, I thought I was just delivering a book, keeping a promise to a lonely old woman. I didn't know I was walking into any of this. I didn't know there was a mother and a murder and 25 years of lies. She looked at him. But I think she knew. Margaret. I think she knew exactly what she was doing when she gave me that radio and asked me to find you. I think she spent her whole life waiting for the right person to carry the truth, and somehow, at the end, she decided it was me. A maid. Nobody. You're not nobody, Vincent said. I told you that the first night, and I meant it. You're the person my mother trusted with the most important thing she owned. She was the best judge of character I've ever heard of, and she chose you. He almost smiled. And you carried a murderer's confession out of a building while his hitman was picking the lock, and you didn't even know that's what it was. You did it because you made a promise. Do you have any idea how rare that is? In my whole life, in the whole world I've lived in, I have never met one person who would do that. Not one. You would, Emily said quietly. You did. You came for us. You didn't have to. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them, something neither of them named, something that had been building since the first night in the empty restaurant, when a poor maid refused to be afraid of the most dangerous man in the city. There's going to be a storm, Vincent said. When this comes out, my whole world is going to come down. There are men who work for me, men who serve Richard, who are not going to let this happen quietly. It's going to get dangerous before it gets better. For me. Maybe for you. He met her eyes. I can protect you through it. I want to. But I need you to understand what you're standing next to before you decide to keep standing next to it. I've stood next to worse, Emily said. I've stood next to a bathroom door with a killer on the other side. I've stood next to a hospital bed, wondering how to pay for my brother's third surgery with money I don't have. I've stood next to a dying woman who had no one else in the world. She lifted her chin. I'm not afraid of standing next to you, Vincent. I've spent my whole life standing next to hard things. At least this time I'm standing next to someone who's finally trying to do the right thing. And Vincent Blackwell, who had walked out of his father's house that night, having lost everything he was ever given, looked at the woman across from him and understood, for the first time in 25 years, that he had just been handed something no one could steal, no one could buy, and no lever in the world could pull away. He stood up, he took the tape out of his coat and the diary, and he set them both on the table between them, the way Emily had set the diary on his table that first night. And he looked at them, the whole truth of his life, and then he looked at the door, and beyond it, the long, hard road of tearing down everything Richard had built. Then let's do it right, he said. All of it. In the light, where he could never stand it. Doing it right took longer than a single night, and it cost more than Vincent had imagined. And there were moments in the weeks that followed when he wondered if his mother had understood just how much she was asking of him when she left the truth in his hands. The morning after he walked out of Richard's house, Vincent did not go to a prosecutor, and he did not go to a newspaper. He went to Marcus first because Marcus had been with him 11 years, and Marcus deserved to hear it from his mouth and not read it in a headline. "I'm going to tell you something," Vincent said, "and when I'm done, you can walk out that door and never look back, and I won't hold it against you. In fact, I'll understand it, because what I'm about to do is going to bring the whole thing down. Everything Richard built, everything I built on top of it." And he told Marcus all of it. The mother in the nursing home, the diary, the tape, the father Richard had murdered, the maid who had carried the truth out of a burning building. Marcus listened without a word, and when it was over, he was quiet for a long time. "You're really going to do it," Marcus said. "You're going to burn it down, your own house." "I am." "You know what happens to a man who does that. There are people in this city, people who serve Richard, people who'll lose everything if that tape comes out. They're not going to shake your hand and wish you well." "I know." "You could get killed, boss, you know that. The second word gets out that you turned, you're not the most powerful man in Chicago anymore. You're a target." "I know that too," Vincent said. "So walk out the door, Marcus. Save yourself. I mean it. This isn't your fight." And Marcus looked at the man he'd followed for 11 years, and something in his weathered face shifted, and he said, "My grandmother raised me. Did you know that? My mother couldn't, so my grandmother did. She died 3 years ago in a place a lot like the one where your mother died. And I didn't visit her enough at the end. I was too busy with all of this." He gestured at the world Richard had built. "So no, I'm not walking out the door. If you're finally going to do one clean thing in your life, I want to be standing next to you when you do it." That was the first person who chose to stand with Vincent instead of run, but it was not the last, and in the weeks that followed, Vincent learned a strange and humbling thing. He had spent his whole life believing that fear was the only thing that held men to you. Richard had taught him that. Rule through fear, need no one, trust no one. But when Vincent walked into that dangerous transition, not as a tyrant protecting his throne, but as a man trying to tear down something rotten, he discovered that some of the people around him had been waiting their whole lives for permission to be something better than what the Empire had made them. Not all of them. There was a war of a kind. There were men loyal to Richard who understood exactly what Vincent's tape meant, and who tried, more than once, to make sure it never saw daylight. There were nights that got dangerous. Nights when Vincent moved Emily and Daniel from one safe place to another. Nights when the old skills Richard had drilled into him were the only reason all of them lived to see morning. The irony was not lost on Vincent that the very ruthlessness Richard had built into him was what kept the truth alive long enough to destroy Richard with it. The weapon the murderer had forged turned in his hand at the very end. But Vincent did not fight that war the way the old Vincent would have. He did not answer blood with blood for its own sake. He protected the people who mattered. He defended the truth, and everything else he channeled toward the single goal his mother had died praying for. He gathered evidence. He had lawyers, real ones, quiet, careful ones, build a case around the tape and the diary and the letters. He tracked down what had happened to the mechanic who disappeared 25 years ago, and found the man's family, and gave them the answer they had wondered about for a quarter century. He documented everything Richard had ever stolen, every obstacle Richard had ever removed, and he assembled it into something that could not be buried, could not be bought, could not be pulled apart by any lever in Richard's hand. And then, when it was ready, he gave it to the light. The day the truth came out, it came out all at once, everywhere, exactly as Vincent had promised Richard it would. The tape, the letters, the murder of Thomas Collins, the theft of a family business, the forced disappearance of a mother, and at the center of it, the confession, in Richard Hawthorne's own voice, saying it was nothing personal, it was business, in a tone so cold that people who heard it never forgot it. Richard Hawthorne, who had ruled through fear his whole life, who had believed to the very end that everything could be bought and every threat could be erased, was arrested in the study of the house on the hill, and he did not go quietly. And it did not matter that he did not go quietly, because for the first time in his life, there was no lever left to pull. The truth had no price. That was the thing he had never understood, and it was the thing that finally destroyed him. Vincent did not go to watch it happen. Some part of him thought he would want to, the old part, the part Richard had built. But when the day came, he found he had no appetite for it. Watching Richard fall gave him nothing. It was not revenge he had wanted. It was justice. And justice, he was learning, felt very different from revenge. Revenge would have been a bullet in a study. Justice was a mother's voice, finally heard, in the light of day, believed at last by the whole world. Revenge would have made Vincent into Richard. Justice made him into Adrian again. The empire came apart, just as Richard had warned it would. Everything built on the stolen foundation crumbled when the foundation was exposed. Vincent lost most of it. The businesses, the money, the power, the world where his name had made men go pale. He gave up more than he kept, and much of what he kept he gave away. And he did it with a strange and growing lightness, because every piece of that world he let go of was a piece of Richard he was cutting out of himself. But he did not lose everything, because it turned out that when you have spent your life being feared, and you choose, at great cost, to do one true and public and righteous thing, the world notices. Vincent Blackwell did not become a saint. He would never be a simple good man, and he knew it, and he never pretended otherwise. But the resources he had left, he turned toward the only thing that had ever felt real to him in the whole long nightmare of his life. He turned them toward the kind of people his mother had been, the forgotten ones, the ones with no power. The nursing home where Margaret had died alone, the one that everyone forgot the address of, Vincent found it, and he did not just donate to it. He rebuilt it. He put his mother's name on it, and he made it a place where no one would die the way she had died, alone in a room with a broken radio and no one to fix it but a maid who happened to be kind. He funded others like it across the city. He created a program, quietly, for families drowning in medical debt, the way Emily and Daniel had been drowning, because he had learned from Emily what he could never have learned from Richard, that the difference between a family surviving and a family being destroyed was often just one person with power deciding to care. Daniel got his surgery, the real one, the good one, the one Emily could never have afforded in 10 lifetimes of cleaning floors. And then he got the physical therapy, and the time to heal, and the treatment that let him one day set down the crutches for good. Vincent did this without ceremony, and without ever once making Emily or her brother feel that they owed him for it. That was important to him, more important than he could quite explain. He had grown up owing everything to a man who never let him forget it. He would not do that to anyone, least of all to the two people who had, without meaning to, saved his soul. Because that was what Emily had done, and Vincent knew it, and he told her so one evening, months later, when the storm had finally passed and the world had settled into something new and quiet. "You saved my life," he said. "Not the day you called me about the man outside your building. Before that, the first night, when you walked into my restaurant and refused to be afraid of me, when you told me a promise was the only thing you'd ever owned that no one could take away." He shook his head. "I'd forgotten people like you existed. Richard raised me to believe you were a fairy tale, a soft lie people tell themselves. And then you walked in, and you were real. And everything he'd built in me started to come apart the moment I saw it. I didn't do anything," Emily said. "I just kept a promise." "You keep saying that," Vincent said, "like it's a small thing. It's not a small thing. It's the biggest thing there is. I ran an empire on the idea that everyone can be bought, and then a maid walked in who couldn't, and it turned out she was stronger than everything I'd ever built. Do you understand? My mother knew it. That's why she chose you. Out of everyone in the world, in her last days, with the most important truth of her life, she chose a poor girl who cleaned her room and fixed her radio and sat with her at night. Because she knew what I had to learn the hard way. The poorest person in the room can carry the greatest gift there is." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She'd be proud of you. I know that for certain. I sat with her, Vincent. I knew her heart at the end better than anyone. And everything she wanted, everything she prayed for in those letters she couldn't send, it was this. It was you, becoming this. Not powerful, not feared, this. A man doing the right thing even when it costs him everything." She smiled, just a little. She got her son back, 1 week too late to say it with her voice. But she got him back. You proved her whole life wasn't a waste. 25 years of holding on, of writing letters into the dark, of keeping a truth she couldn't use. And in the end it worked. You're the proof it worked. She thought Vincent had to look away for a moment, the way he always did when the grief and the something else that lived alongside it rose up together in his chest. There had been a moment, near the very end of everything, that Vincent had not told anyone about, not even Emily. When the case was built and the tape was ready, and the whole thing was about to break, Vincent had gone one last time to the cemetery where his mother was buried. A plain grave in a plain plot, because there had been no one to pay for anything better, no family, no son. And he had stood there, and he had done something he had not done since he was 7 years old, standing at a window. He had talked to her. He had told her he was sorry, that he had believed the lie, that he had hated her for 25 years for something she never did, and that the hatred had been the cruelest theft of all, because it had robbed them both of every day they might have had. He had told her he understood now, that she never left, that she wrote him a letter every few weeks for a quarter of a century, that she died with his name in her mouth, and he had told her that he had heard her, finally, and that he was going to do the thing she'd been unable to do, the thing she'd spent her whole powerless life praying someone would do. And then he had done the last thing. He had a proper headstone made, and on it, under her name, Margaret Collins, he had the stone carved with the truth of who she was, not abandoned, not forgotten. Beloved mother of Adrian, because that was the name she had given him, and it belonged to her, and he was giving it back to her the only way he still could. That grave was not forgotten anymore. Emily went with him sometimes, and on the anniversary of the day Margaret died, they went together, and they brought the old radio, the one that had carried the truth out of the dark, and they let it play the old jazz stations she had loved, the ones that played their song, and for a little while the woman who had died alone was surrounded by the only two people in the world who had ever truly known her heart. The diary sat on a shelf in Vincent's home now, a much smaller home than the one he'd had before, an ordinary home, the kind of place a man could actually live in. He read from it sometimes, on hard nights, not the painful pages, the other ones, the birthday letters, the ordinary Tuesday letters, the letters where his mother, cut off from him, forbidden from reaching him, had simply written down the small daily love of a parent for a child, into a void for 25 years, refusing to let that love die just because the world had made it impossible to deliver. Those letters had reached him at last, every one of them, and on the nights he read them, Vincent understood that his mother had won. Richard had taken her son, her husband, her freedom, her whole life, but he had never been able to take the one thing she guarded to the very end, the love itself, and in the end, that love had reached across 25 years and a locked door and a lifetime of lies. Carried the last few feet by the hands of a poor maid, and it had brought her son home. Emily's life changed too, though never in the way people might have expected, because Vincent understood, better than anyone, the difference between lifting someone up and putting them in your debt. He never made Emily beholden to him. He never treated her as someone beneath him to be rescued or above him to be worshipped. He treated her the way she had treated a dying stranger in room 14, as an equal, as someone whose kindness was worth more than his power had ever been. And over time, the two of them, the mafia boss who had lost his empire and the maid who had never had one, built something between them that neither had ever had before. It was not a fairy tale. Vincent would carry what he had done, what he had been, for the rest of his life, and he never pretended otherwise, and Emily never asked him to. But it was real, and it was honest, and it was chosen freely by two people who wanted nothing from each other except each other, and after the lives they had both lived, that was more than either of them had ever dared hope for. One evening, near the end of that long first year, Emily found Vincent standing by the window in their small home, the diary in his hands, looking out at the ordinary street where ordinary people were coming home to ordinary lives. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About what he said," Vincent answered. "Richard. At the end, he said everything I had, everything I was, he built. That without him, I'd have been nothing." He turned the diary over in his hands. And he was right in a way. He did build Vincent Blackwell, the feared man, the empire, all of it. He built it, and then I burned it down. He looked at her. But he was wrong about the important part. He thought the empire was everything. He thought that if he took it away, there'd be nothing left. And there was nothing left, Emily. The day it all came down, I had nothing. No money to speak of, no power, no name that made men afraid. Everything Richard built was gone. He set the diary down, and I was happier than I'd been in 25 years. Emily came and stood beside him at the window. Because that was the lie at the center of everything he taught me, Vincent said. That power was the thing, that the man who has the most wins. He spent his whole life proving that lie, and he died proving it, alone in a cell with nobody who loved him and nobody he loved, richer than God and poorer than any man I've ever known. And my mother spent her whole life proving the opposite. She had nothing. She died with nothing. And she was the richest person in this entire story because she loved someone enough to hold on for 25 years. And because at the very end, there was someone who loved her enough to sit beside her in the dark. He put his arm around Emily. Money can buy power. Fear can control people. Richard proved both of those things beyond any doubt. But there's a third thing, the only thing that ever actually mattered. And he never had it, and he never understood it. And it was the one thing that finally beat him. Only love and truth can heal what time has broken. My mother knew that. She bet her whole life on it, and she was right. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, and the two of them stood at the window in the fading light, the diary on the table behind them, the radio in the corner, the long nightmare finally over. A poor maid had accidentally delivered an old diary to the wrong man, and it had turned out to be exactly the right one. She had spoken a name no one had said in 25 years, and a mafia boss had frozen, and everything he thought he knew about his own life had begun to come apart. And in the end, the truth hidden inside that diary had not just brought down a murderer or destroyed an empire. It had done something Richard Hawthorne, with all his power, could never have imagined possible. It had taken a hollowed-out man built out of ice and lies, and it had given him back his mother, his father's memory, his real name, and his soul. Margaret Collins never got to see it. She died 1 week too soon, alone in a forgotten room, with only a kind stranger to hold her hand. But she died having done the one thing she had refused, across 25 years of exile and silence and fear, to ever stop doing. She died still loving her son. And that love, carried the final few feet by the hands of the poorest and kindest person in the whole city, reached him at last, and it saved him. And it was stronger than every empire ever built on fear. The poorest person in the room had carried the greatest gift, and in the end, it was the only thing that mattered at all. Long after the empire fell, and the headlines faded, and the world moved on to its next scandal, Vincent Blackwell found himself returning, again and again, to a single question that no amount of power had ever prepared him to answer. What is love, actually, that it could do what it did? That it could reach across 25 years of silence, survive a murder and a theft and a lifetime of deliberate lies, and arrive, finally, in the hands of a stranger, still alive, still warm, still strong enough to save a man everyone had given up on. He had spent his whole life believing he understood the forces that move the world: fear, money, power, leverage. He could have written a book on all of them. But love had been the one thing Richard never taught him, because Richard did not believe it was real, and so Vincent had gone into adulthood fluent in every language except the only one that mattered, and it had taken a dead woman and a poor maid to finally teach it to him. What he came to understand, slowly, over the quiet years that followed, was that love is not the soft thing the world pretends it is. That had been Richard's great error, and the error of every hard man like him. They looked at love and saw weakness. They saw a leash, a vulnerability, a soft place where the knife goes in, and so they cut it out of themselves and cut it out of the people they controlled and mistook the numbness that was left for strength. But Vincent had seen now what love actually was, and it was not soft at all. His mother had loved him from inside a prison, under threat of death, with no power and no freedom and no hope of ever being believed. For 25 years she had loved him with absolutely nothing to gain. No reward, no reunion, no acknowledgement, writing letters into a void that swallowed every one of them. That was not weakness. That was the most stubborn strength Vincent had ever encountered in his life, a strength that outlasted an empire, a strength that Richard, for all his ruthlessness, could never once break. Richard could kill a man who wouldn't sell. Richard could make a widow disappear. Richard could hollow out a child, but he could not make Margaret Collins stop loving her son, and in the end, that one thing he could not do was the thing that destroyed him. And so Vincent learned the first truth. Love is the only power that cannot be taken by force. Everything else can be. Money can be stolen, and Richard stole it. Freedom can be stolen, and Richard stole that too. A name can be stolen. A father, a childhood, a whole life. Richard proved that a sufficiently ruthless man can take almost anything from almost anyone. But he could not reach into Margaret's heart and remove what was there, and he could not reach into the boy at the window and kill the small buried part that still, underneath all the ice, belonged to her. Love was the one territory his violence could not enter. It was the one vault his levers could not open. And that, Vincent understood now, was why every tyrant in history had feared it and tried to stamp it out, because it was the single thing they could never fully own, and a thing they could not own was a thing that could one day undo them. The second truth took Vincent longer to accept, because it cut against everything Richard had built into him, and it was this. Love and truth are the same thing in the end, wearing different clothes. He had always thought of them as separate. Truth was hard, factual, a weapon or a shield. Love was feeling, sentiment, the soft stuff. But his mother had shown him they were one. Her love for him was expressed ultimately as her refusal to let the truth die. She could have made peace with the lie. It would have been easier. She could have let herself believe that her son was better off, that the past was past, that nothing could be done. Instead, she guarded the truth for 25 years precisely because she loved him, because she could not bear for him to live and die inside a lie about who he was and where he came from and whether he had ever been loved. To love someone, Vincent finally understood, is to refuse to let them live in a lie about themselves. Richard's whole method had been the opposite. Richard controlled through lies, through the careful management of what people were allowed to believe. He told a boy his mother didn't love him. He told a city he was a legitimate businessman. He built everything on falsehood, because falsehood was controllable and truth was not. And love, real love, was on the side of truth. Always, because love wants the beloved to see clearly, even when the clear sight is painful, even when the truth costs everything. His mother had chosen truth over his comfort. She had left him a tape that would shatter his whole world, because she loved him too much to let him keep a peace built on a lie. That was love, not the absence of hard truth, but the willingness to hand someone the hardest truth of all, because they deserved to have it. The third truth was the one that changed how Vincent lived the rest of his days. He had believed, under Richard's teaching, that love made you weak because it gave other people power over you. Care about something and you can be hurt through it. Need someone and you can be controlled through that need. It was, Vincent had to admit, not entirely wrong. Love did open you. It did make you vulnerable. Emily's care for him, his care for her, meant that each of them now had a place where the world could wound them that had not existed before. But what Richard had never understood, what he had been constitutionally incapable of understanding, was that the vulnerability was not the price of love. It was the whole point. A man who cannot be reached cannot be loved, and a man who cannot be loved is not strong. He is simply alone. And Vincent had watched, at the very end, what a lifetime of that particular strength added up to. It added up to an old man in a study, richer than God, holding a gun he was too cornered to use, offering money to a son who wanted nothing from him, and dying at last with no one on earth to grieve him. That was where Richard's strength led. That was its final destination. And beside it, Vincent set the image of his mother, dying in a forgotten room with a broken radio, and one poor maid holding her hand so she would not be alone. By every measure Richard believed in, Margaret had lost, And Richard had won. She had nothing. He had everything. But Vincent had stood at the end of both their lives and seen the truth with his own eyes, and the truth was that the woman with nothing had been rich beyond counting, and the man with everything had been the poorest creature Vincent had ever known. The vulnerability was the wealth. The openness was the strength. The capacity to be reached was the only thing that made a life worth having lived. And there was a fourth truth, quieter than the others, that Vincent came to hold most closely of all. It was about the poor maid, and it was this: love does not care about the ledger. It does not calculate. Emily Carter had sat with a dying stranger for months, past the end of her shifts, unpaid, unrewarded, for no reason except that a lonely woman needed someone, and Emily was the kind of person who could not walk past a need she was able to meet. There was nothing in it for her. There was never anything in it for her. She had walked into the most dangerous man in the city's restaurant to keep a promise that could not possibly benefit her. And she had carried a killer's confession out of a burning building because she had given her word. And she had done all of it, not as a calculation, but as an instinct, the way some rare people simply move through the world, giving what they have to whoever needs it. Richard had spent his life certain that everyone had a price. And Emily had been living proof that he was wrong, that there existed, in cheap coats and worn shoes, in the people who cleaned the floors of the powerful and went home to sleep on pull-out couches, a kind of love that operated entirely outside the economy Richard understood. It gave without expecting return. It kept promises that offered no reward. It sat with the dying and asked for nothing. And it turned out that this love, the freely given, uncalculating love of the poorest person in the room, was the strongest force in the entire story, because it was the thing that carried the truth the final few feet home. Margaret's love guarded the truth. Vincent's love, once awakened, wielded it. But it was Emily's love, the love that wanted nothing, that actually moved it through the world, from a nursing home room to a mafia boss's table to a courtroom to the light. Without the maid who asked for nothing, none of it would have reached anyone. The greatest gift really had been carried by the poorest hands. Vincent thought about all of this often in his ordinary house on his ordinary street, with the diary on the shelf and the old radio in the corner, and Emily somewhere in the next room. He had once ruled through fear, and fear had given him a city, and the city had given him nothing. Now he had almost none of what he'd once had, and he had everything. He understood finally why his mother had bet her entire life on love and truth when every practical consideration told her to give up. She had not been naive. She had not been weak. She had simply seen further than Richard ever could. She had seen that fear builds empires that crumble, that money buys power that corrupts and isolates, but that love and truth, though they move slowly, though they suffer and wait and endure in silence for decades, are the only forces in the whole world that actually heal what has been broken. Everything else just breaks things further. Only these two, working together, patient as stone, can take something shattered and make it whole again. And Vincent Blackwell, who had been shattered so completely and so young that he had lived most of his life without even knowing he was broken, was whole now, not perfect, not innocent. He would carry his sins to his grave, and he knew it, but whole in the way that matters, because the truth had finally reached him, and the love had finally been let in. And a man who has been reached and let in is a man who has been healed, whatever else remains broken around the edges. His mother had died believing love was worth everything it cost her. 25 years of silence, a life spent in exile, a truth she guarded but could never use. She had bet all of it on the chance that love and truth would one day win, even after she was gone, even when she would never see it. And she had been right. She had been right about all of it. Love had proven stronger than fear, and truth had proven stronger than power, and the poorest person in the room had carried the greatest gift straight to the heart of the man who needed it most. In the end, Margaret Collins had been proven right about the only thing she ever truly believed, and it is the only thing Vincent came at last to understand, that any of us ever really needs to get right. Money can buy power, and fear can control people, but only love and truth can heal what time has broken, and they will heal it every single time. If only someone is willing to hold on long enough to let them.